Our secrets are normally laid to rest with us. But sometimes, when we are no longer here, a hidden truth is revealed.
Well, I suppose once you unravel something from someone's past, it all comes out, and Granny's not able to hide from her past any longer. Now that she's long gone, it's all coming out piece by piece.
Yeah, she kept it so well hidden in her lifetime.
She did.
32 years ago, Winifred O'Donnell took to her grave the secret that she was a bigamist.
I am bound by brutal circumstance and cruel extreme. Bound by brutal circumstance and cruel extreme.
Well, I'm writing a song called Mother of Pearl at the moment, which it's a lovely sounding title, because to me, my granny's this shining, beautiful woman, actually. I can see her as that, even though I only knew her when she was old. I've got all the old photographs. And to me, she was a sparkling sort of person.
Will you brush your
The first suspicion for Alison about her grandmother's past was when she looked at her baby book.
Oh, where are you now?
It wasn't what was in the book, it was what was left out which intrigued her.
Over the years, every time I went home, I'd look at this book and I'd wonder about it. There's a family tree in it, and her section is empty, except for one or two surnames, which we knew about anyway. And I asked my mother many questions about who these people were, and she's always said to me, I haven't a clue, we don't know anything about them at all. And so I said to her, I'm going to start looking into her life and find out who she was. I'd heard that she was very glamorous in her youth, and she had a beautiful skin right up to when she died. And she still looked after her looks, but she wore grubby old pinny and when she was in the kitchen, and she had arthritis. She hobbled backwards and forwards, and she hummed all the time. By then her singing voice had gone, but she hummed under her breath songs from bygone era. And I remember her as being a twinkly, loving, charming woman who cared passionately for grandchildren and gave us little treats all the time, little chocolate bars, crisps, and things that we weren't supposed to have all the time. And she really was absolutely wonderful.
Winifred was a wonderful grandmother, but she was an absent mother. She was a fleeting visitor to her first two children before finally cutting her ties completely. Only one of them, Betty, survives today.
It's a little difficult to remember when my mother used to come and visit because I didn't seem to have a relationship with her. I didn't call her anything, as far as I can remember. I wasn't told about her. I suppose I must have just known she was my mother or something. And I didn't find it strange that she visited rather than lived with us. Somehow I remember associated with her chocolate coffee. I mean, coffee fingers, milk chocolate fingers filled with coffee cream or something. I don't know why I remember these, because I don't know whether it has any connection with that at all, really.
Winifred grew up in South London in the early 1900s. Born into a lower middle-class family, she was the only child of Charles Shears and his wife Ellen, and appeared to have a loving upbringing. But as a teenager, she fell for a dashing young man, Walter Lee. They met at Dulwich Tennis Club. He said he was an American who had come to Britain from China. But it was a love match her father disapproved of.
I don't know why my grandfather had such an antagonistic attitude towards him at all, because everybody apparently said he was very presentable, nicely spoken and educated, and nobody knew why. But maybe because, looking back on photographs now, he has a slight, I think, Oriental look. And maybe being a Victorian in those days, he had a thing about foreigners, as a lot of people do now, of course. There are times when I think that quite a few of us have a few of the Chinese look about us, one way or another, either high cheekbones or something, you know. And I suppose that makes you wonder, you know, and I do wonder. And now it's my chief quest now is to know about my father, really, because he's a shadowy figure, really.
In 1914, the couple married in haste at St Thomas's Church, Streatham. Winifred's father did not attend the ceremony and disowned his daughter.
So this is the where the marriage actually took place?
Yes, this would have been where it would have been, I think. Well, I believe so. You know.
So I'm standing on the very spot.
Yes, I think so, yep.
That's quite a strange feeling. And where would they have signed the registry?
Well, the older ideas were they used to do it in the vestry.
So we can have a look at the vestry?
Yes, do come through and ask.
Alison, who is writing a book about her grandmother's life, is visiting the church for the first time to try and find out more about Walter, Winifred's first husband.
Now then, there we are. Reverend Wolf, that's him.
Okay. So would he would have conducted the marriage?
Well, yes, I mean,
he's on the actual certificate, isn't he?
That's the chappie.
We don't know much about Walter.
Oh.
We're trying to find information wherever we can about him.
He was a merchant.
Well, yes, he was a merchant, and he was a number of different things at different times.
Oh, I see. You said the better, eh?
Well, his nationality was also in question, so I wonder what he would have had to have produced for this marriage. A birth certificate, perhaps?
No, you don't normally produce anything. You can just go and say...
You don't have to produce any identification?
No, not at all.
That's a pity, in this case.
A year after the marriage, Walter returned to China in search of fortune. Winifred and their son Raymond joined him 6 months later. The young family enjoyed a comfortable life.
She had plenty of servants, and there was obviously quite a bit of money. There are photographs of her at the races, looking very glamorous and smart. I know that she sang at weddings, and she sang at a Red Cross concert in Hang Kao, and she sang "Oh Lovely Night" by Landon Ronald. And she told me that she used to sing for the troops in China.
But something caused Winifred to flee China just 3 years after arriving. She returned to London with her son Raymond and pregnant with Betty. A letter from her friend Madge Howells gives a clue.
I am hoping that you have got free from that brood and settled down with someone really nice. I would love to know that you are happy.
Back in South London, she gave up her children to the care of her parents and took to the boards. Her stage name was Nina Lee. Walter, aware that his wife was now leading a glamorous and modern lifestyle, feared for his marriage.
What particularly worries me is the fact the atmosphere Winnie is compelled to live in at the theatre and temptation to a lonely girl. Being frank, as it's a vital matter that concerns the entire life of 4 human beings.
He was right. She soon fell into the arms of Major Percival O'Donnell, a conductor with the Royal Marines military band. Although he was already married and waiting for a divorce, Winifred never told Percival of her own previous marriage, nor of her 2 children. After they'd had 3 children, he finally persuaded her to marry him, but she was still legally married to Walter. Sylvia, who is Alison's mother, was the couple's 4th child. She remembers being brought up within a loving family.
My mother was always very affectionate and loving towards us all, and funny, and, you know, like anybody else's mother, I suppose. And she gave us a very happy life, and I think she gave my father a very happy life as well. He looked after her because he was older, I suppose, but they were very close. very warm.
But as Winifred cared for her second family, her first two children suffered her neglect.
I think my brother Raymond was affected by not seeing his parents again because, after all, he had known them for about 5 years, you see. I once asked him if he remembered China, which is where he'd spent most of his childhood, really, up until he was 5 anyway. And he said, oh, he didn't remember anything about it. Well, I can't feel that that could have been entirely correct, but he wouldn't talk about it to me, and I think he was probably very hurt by it all. He wrote a letter to her. I don't know whether it had been posted, but it had never arrived, and we had it back again. So when he was about 14, I think, something like that, he obviously wanted to get in touch with her, but that came to nothing.
I was ever so pleased to receive a letter from you, as I was half afraid you'd forgotten. I've written this with the courage born of despair, hoping against hope that it will I'm getting rather desperate, for I'm stuck in this God-forsaken hole. Yes. Please, can you write to me as soon as you can?
It was very sad, really, that she had to abandon him because he had been part of her life, you know, for 5 years.
Raymond's daughter Jenny felt the long-term effects of her father's abandonment.
When I see these pictures, it makes me very sad, for my father was emotionally blighted by his disjointed childhood. He had no family life, and it affected him really the rest of his life. I think he felt unwanted, and he didn't show emotion. He was left in boarding school at 4.5. Nobody picked him up in school holidays. And then it was aged grandparents that brought him up. Not the life I'd want. Even though they were very good, I'm sure. It's not normal. And he didn't actually live with his sister Betty either. They were apart. Didn't see much of her. So it was an unnatural childhood, and it affected all his life. And I suppose to some extent us.
Winifred could no longer maintain her double life, and after 5 years, all contact with Raymond and Betty ceased. If her bigamy had been discovered, she would have been sent to prison. When Percival died in 1945, Winifred, now 50, moved to Ireland in the hope of escaping her crime.
She must have had a life where she was dying to talk to somebody, I suppose, about what she'd left behind, her 2 children that she'd left behind, and she'd nobody to talk to. And she never said a word to anybody in her life. So I think the only way she managed to let it out a bit was to have conversations with herself, sort of arguments with herself, you know, doing both sides and everything. And you had to be careful not to go in the room if she was, because she wouldn't stop. She was sort of carried away in the middle of them, you know. So I suppose it was the only way she could let out any of it.
Well, as grandchildren growing up with her, we asked her the odd question about her singing life. But any questions were met with usually some degree of not hysteria, but she was upset, visibly upset, and it was off-putting enough for the children never to ask again. And my grandpa used to say, well, don't ask Mummy about that. She gets upset about those sort of questions. So they managed between them to put off any line of questioning that would come from anywhere.
But the first real evidence came when Alison found her grandmother's marriage certificate. It was littered with inaccuracies.
There were clues as to her address, her father's occupation, her name, her age, together with Grandpa's, and his details were all, of course, correctly recorded. But hers, as I later discovered, were all just slightly wrong. She'd mixed her father and first husband's 2 professions up and names up, so it was a jumble of both. Plus her name wasn't correct either. She'd used partly her stage name together with her first Christian name and her married name instead of her maiden name. So it was a complete fiction. And I knew that there were clues to be had there, and it took me a long time to find out who she really was.
Today, Alison has brought Jenny, her new half-cousin, to the National Archives at Kew, where a document containing vital information about her grandmother was unearthed. The only certainty was that Winifred had once lived in China and obviously returned to the UK. This meant her name should have appeared on a ship passenger list. It was eventually found by independent researcher Roger Nixon, who has helped bring the two families together.
Hello.
Alison, good to see you. So many years. You must be Jenny. I'm pleased to see you too. Well, it's been a long while.
It has, yes. We better get cracking.
I think we'd better. Come on, follow me and I'll show you where to go. This document, Jenny, is really one which has changed the route of your family history considerably.
Yes.
As you can see here, she's accompanied by Raymond, but of course at the time we didn't know
Who Raymond was.
We didn't know who Raymond was. We didn't know that she'd had a child. But she's going to Angle Road in Stockwell. And had the address not have been here, I fear that we would never really have got as far as we have.
The electoral register revealed that a Charles William Shears lived at this address. The similarity between his Christian names and those on the marriage certificate couldn't be ignored.
We began to smell a rat, if you like, and the fact that this family was called Shears nevertheless led us to go back to the General Register Office, registers of birth, deaths and marriages, and we looked in the births starting in 1900 and worked slowly backwards and eventually found a Winifred A. Shears. Alison then went and did some more searching of marriage registers, and we then found a marriage of Winifred and Walter in London, I think in 1914 or 1915. And then, of course, we found the birth of the little boy in London, and everything fell together.
Fell into place after.
Now, how do we get to you, Jenny? Well, we assumed the little boy born around about 1919, 1918, would have married around about 1940. And then we then went to look for a birth for issue of that marriage, and we found you.
The night that I found everybody, it was a very high point and it was a very low point because I felt all the emotions, the whole gamut of emotions, and I felt joy and sorrow in equal measure. And it was a very, very difficult night, and it was a very difficult week and months that followed, I think. But the high points since have been the meetings with the families and how we're able to talk about our memories of Granny. And they talk about Winifred, we talk about Nina. And we've been mostly quite happy. And looking at our photographs, looking at her jewellery, talking about her fondly. And they've really been high points.
Hello, Mum. These are interesting photographs. The last one's taken in Hankow, just before Winifred departed, and
She was pregnant.
She was pregnant with you, with Mum.
Yeah.
I think she looks sad. It's kind of really sort of.
I think she was sad to leave China, or
She never saw Walter again.
No. And I suspect that she probably knew that
Probably, yes.
she wasn't going to.
Yes.
I understood that Walter gave her a year to make her name on the stage.
Oh, was that right?
That's what I seem to remember my father saying. And that then after the year, if she hadn't made herself known, then she was to return home with the children. That's what I understood.
Oh, really? So that's what he had been led to believe, that he was allowing her to go, as it were.
But 2 years later, Walter was still writing in the hope of a reconciliation.
As my business has improved somewhat, I proposed to Winnie that I should come home and adjust matters between us at the end of the year, or wire her sufficient money to come out and meet me in America or Shanghai.
But Walter never did make it back to the UK, possibly because he had closer ties with China than he had first admitted.
Well, I don't think Walter looks Chinese.
See what photographs we've got of Walter. Got here.
I think his face is too narrow to be Chinese.
Well, it depends what part of China he came from, I think. If you look at
That's true.
Chinese men.
Well, I think this one is the close-up here is the best
tall.
one.
He seems to be quite
here.
tall, whereas I think Chinese tend to be smaller, don't they?
Yes.
But I mean, there could be some sort of East Asian...
Yes.
Yes, there could be.
Mixed parentage, possibly.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's true. So, I mean, it would be...
So, I mean, the way to
interesting
solve that would be to take a DNA test.
Yes.
DNA Print Genomics.
Hello, my name is Alison O'Donnell. I'm calling from Dublin to find out whether you could let me know whether it would be possible to do a DNA test on an elderly European woman to find out whether she might have some East Asian blood. Her father, we think, may have had some mixed race background. Would that be possible? Could you do that?
Absolutely. Our Ancestry by DNA 2.5 test is capable of reporting East Asian admixture as well as Sub-Saharan African, European, and Native American.
Right. So what would I need to do in order to apply for this testing?
Yes, you merely have to order the Ancestry by DNA test, and we'll send you a DNA collection kit, which is comprised of a couple of what I call buccal swabs.
Oh, inside's coming out. Oh, I see.
Which are tiny cotton-like swabs that you rub on the inside of your cheek gently. And then you place the swabs inside of the envelope that we provide you, but you have to let the swabs air dry first.
Okay, face down.
Has it got to dry a bit? Let it dry.
Oh, go let it dry for a sec. It's like brushing your teeth in front of an audience.
Extraordinary to be doing this finally, isn't it?
I know, it's amazing.
That we're able to do it now.
Yeah, that's
marvellous.
Absolutely amazing, really.
Alison has just received some fresh information from American researcher Brian Gunn. He has been checking his country's national archives to try and find out if Walter was a US citizen. What has been unearthed may explain why Walter never returned to Britain.
So he's found something, wow.
He has found something concrete at last, and this is it.
How exciting.
He's found Winifred's passport application, which, as you know, I applied for and was told didn't exist.
Yes.
Well, it was misfiled.
Oh, wow.
And
Winifred's
this
passport.
is it.
American passport.
Her American passport, and this is it.
Wow. Goodness me.
It gives her her height, 5'6", and her eyes are blue.
And
nose is straight.
And there's a picture, look.
Yes, there's a wonderful picture of Raymond with Winifred.
How interesting. So he must have an American passport to have been...
He must have had one. Wow.
He must have some sort of...
It might logically follow that if they found her passport application, that they would find Walter's.
Yes.
Yes.
And the bizarre thing, and the researcher said this was strange, that it is not there.
So there's no passport application.
There is no passport application for him.
How can that be, though? How can he...
Well,
he must have had some proof that he was American.
I tell you what is the case. When he applied for an extension for their 3 passports, his was refused.
How interesting.
He could not get an American passport. Why? Why?
Because he didn't have legally an American nationality.
Yes, or he committed some misdemeanor maybe where he would not be granted one.
That's right.
So he was stuck there, which is probably why he never came home. Even though he might have intended to.
Hello, Alison. How nice
Hello,
to see
Betty.
you.
Lovely
So
to
I
see
believe
you.
you've got the results of the DNA test.
I do indeed. I have
Yes.
them here.
Yes, gosh. Well,
And you'll be the first to see them.
oh, well, that's nice. But I'm a bit apprehensive, of course.
Are you?
But, well, yes, I suppose I am.
Well, the suspense is over.
Yes. Well, here we go. Oh, gosh. It says ancestry 79% European, 21% East Asian.
79% European.
Yes.
And 20?
21% East Asian. It's interesting, isn't it, really?
Oh, 21%.
Yes.
So that means, in fact, that you're quarter East Asian,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
This is great because now we actually know.
You actually know, yes.
And we can work on that.
Yes.
So there you are.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I've always wanted it, well, I say always, wanted it for some years now. I've wanted it done because I felt it would pinpoint somehow. I mean, it would bring things down to a certain point where we know, whereas before it was all speculation.
Yes.
Betty now understands more about her father, but the past has left its mark.
I often think about my background and the fact that I had no mother. I missed the fact that she wasn't there later on when my grandmother died and I lived alone with my grandfather. And so therefore, I didn't have a mother. I never had a mother to turn to. And I think what it's done to me, really, it's made me more independent. I never, perhaps a little too independent sometimes. I don't accept help from people very easily. It's probably made me a harder person because I never had anyone really to rely on. Because when I got to the age when, I could have done with a little help and guidance, I didn't have it. I'm only thankful that I didn't stray off the straight and narrow, I suppose you can say, put it like that, really. But thank God I came through the way I did without too many scars. I might have been a nicer person if I had had a mother, perhaps, I don't know.
Won't you come along soon, oh mother of pearl and invention, to take us to the fair in the playground of our dream? I can't